Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at the fascinating story of how cats arrived in China. Now, you might be surprised to know cats weren't always a part of the Chinese landscape. Imagine China without cats. Hard to picture, right?
Mm.
But for centuries, that was actually the reality. We've got a whole collection of research articles and snippets to help us unpack this.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that really challenges our assumptions about the history of, domestication. I mean, cats are so deeply ingrained in Chinese culture today, it's easy to forget they were actually relative newcomers.
Newcomers.
Yeah, they arrived around 600 CE.
600 CE. So what brought about this, feline migration?
Well, our sources point to the Silk Road.
Oh, of course, the Silk Road, that bustling network of trade routes that connected East and West.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about silk and spices. The Silk Road was also this incredible highway for cultural exchange.
So it seems our feline friends hitched a ride on this highway.
Yeah. And they were most likely presented to Chinese elites as these, exotic gifts by merchants and diplomats. You can kind of picture these travelers with these adorable cats, often white or partially white, carefully tucked away in these small cages amongst their other precious cargo.
Almost like these cats were like ambassadors of their kind,
Yeah, you could say that.
carefully selected to make a good impression.
Right.
But is there any, solid evidence to support this whole Silk Road theory?
This is where it gets really interesting. Scientists have been using ancient DNA analysis to try to trace the origins of these Chinese cats. The findings are really compelling. They examined 22 cat specimens from 14 archaeological sites all across China. And within the DNA, there are these specific markers. Think of them like genetic fingerprints that can help us, track ancestry and lineage.
Okay.
And get this, 14 of these cats shared a marker known as clade IVB. Now, that's a marker that's actually quite uncommon in Western Eurasia.
Wait, back up for a second. Before we go any further, can you just quickly explain what a clade is for those of us who, aren't geneticists?
Oh, sure. Think of a clade as like a branch on the family tree of a species. It represents a group of organisms that share a common ancestor. So in this case, finding this specific clade in Chinese cats suggests they share ancestry with cats from a particular region.
And I'm guessing that region wasn't Western Eurasia.
You got it. What's fascinating is that this same clade, IVB, was also found in a cat discovered in medieval Zenkent, Kazakhstan. And where is Zenkin? Right smack on the Silk Road.
Okay, that's a pretty strong piece of evidence. So we've got this whole historical narrative of cats being brought to China as gifts, and now we've got the genetic evidence to back it up. But how did these exotic felines go from being novelties to becoming so deeply ingrained in Chinese culture?
Well, the timing of their arrival actually coincides with the rise of the Tang Dynasty. This was a period of incredible cultural flourishing in China, lasting from around 618 to 907 CE.
The Tang Dynasty.
Uh-huh. And during this period, cats experienced like a surge in popularity. They became prominent figures in art, literature, and even folk religion.
So it sounds like they really made their mark.
They did.
It's interesting that this happened during the Tang Dynasty specifically. I mean, was there something about Tang Dynasty culture that made these cats so appealing?
That's a great question. And it really speaks to the complex interplay between biology and culture. The Tang Dynasty was a very cosmopolitan era with a strong appreciation for beauty, elegance, and refinement. And these cats, with their graceful movements, striking features, and often white or partially white coats, would have been seen as like embodying those very values.
So they weren't just pets. They were more like status symbols.
Exactly.
Almost like living works of art.
Exactly. They were a way for the elites to demonstrate their worldliness, their connection to these far-off lands along the Silk Road. And this fascination with cats also reflects the shift from earlier periods when native leopard cats were more prevalent in Chinese culture.
It's amazing how these cats, once seen as these exotic treasures, quickly capture the hearts and imaginations of the Tang Dynasty elite.
Yeah, for sure. And their influence extended far beyond the walls of aristocratic homes.
Right, so these cats weren't just like pets. They were woven into the very fabric of Tang Dynasty art and culture.
Exactly.
Okay, so think about it. What images come to mind when you think about the Tang Dynasty?
Ooh, good question.
I think of vibrant silk robes, exquisite poetry, those beautiful ceramic figurines.
Mhm.
And now Thanks to this deep dive, I'm adding cats to that mental picture.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at Tang Dynasty art, we see cats everywhere, lounging in elegant gardens, playing with silk ribbons, even accompanying scholars in their studies.
Like they capture this essence of Tang Dynasty refinement and sophistication.
Absolutely.
It makes me think of those beautiful ceramic figurines that you mentioned. I've seen some in museums, often glazed in these vibrant colors, and the cats always have this serene, almost regal expression.
Uh-huh. And those Tang Dynasty poets, they were smitten with these feline muses. They wrote about their grace, their independence, even their mysterious nature. Cats became metaphors for everything from love and beauty to, solitude and contemplation.
So it's incredible how these animals, once considered exotic gifts, became these powerful symbols in Chinese culture.
Yeah, it really speaks to their adaptability and their undeniable charm, I think. They wormed their way into people's hearts and homes, and their presence just became interwoven with the very fabric of Tang Dynasty life. But this story goes deeper than just cultural trends. The arrival of these cats also coincided with a period when China was experiencing a growing concern about rodent control, particularly in urban areas.
So their practical skills as skilled pest controllers would have added another layer to their appeal.
Right. And remember, we talked about those native leopard cats that were already present in China. Well, these new feline arrivals weren't just competing with them for space and resources, they were also intermingling with them.
Leaving their own genetic mark on the feline population. All right, we talked about how modern Chinese domestic cats have that small percentage of leopard cat ancestry.
Uh-huh. Between 1 and 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it highlights how those biological and cultural exchanges often leave these fascinating traces in the DNA of species. But their impact wasn't limited to genetics. Think about how Chinese culture, with its emphasis on harmony, balance, and respect for nature, might have shaped the way these cats were perceived and treated.
That's an interesting point. It wasn't just a one-way street. It was like this two-way exchange of influences, with cats shaping culture and culture shaping the human-feline relationship.
Exactly. For instance, in traditional Chinese medicine, cats are believed to possess certain healing properties, and their presence is thought to bring good luck and ward off evil spirits.
Almost like spiritual guardians.
Yeah, and if you look at Chinese art, cats are often depicted with a sense of serenity and wisdom, which, reflects those cultural values. So you can see how the inherent nature of cats just kind of blended with the cultural beliefs and practices of China to create this really unique and enduring bond.
Makes you wonder, if cats hadn't arrived in China via the Silk Road, how might Chinese art, literature, even folklore have been different?
That is a fascinating question, isn't it? Would other animals have filled that symbolic niche? Would the artistic and literary landscape have taken a different turn? It's almost like a thought experiment, like imagining this parallel history where those feline paws never graced Chinese soil. But it also speaks to the power of these seemingly small events to ripple through time and shape the course of history and culture.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of our world, even in ancient times.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about how something that seems so simple, like cats arriving in China, can have such a huge impact on culture, art, even spirituality. It really makes you think about all these unexpected connections between us all, across time and continents. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. Remember, we've been looking at the journey of these domesticated cats, but their journey actually began much earlier, like thousands of years ago, in a place far, far away from the Silk Road.
Oh, right. We touched on that before. The whole, the origins of cat domestication in the Fertile Crescent, around 10,000 years ago. It's hard to even imagine a time before cats were our companions.
I know, right? It's this fascinating chapter in the history of human-animal relations. Try to picture those early farmers in the Fertile Crescent, settling into this new way of life, storing grain, and without even knowing it, creating the perfect environment for, well, certain furry pests.
Rodents.
Exactly. Rodents. And you know what comes with rodents?
Wildcats.
Bingo. Wildcats. Specifically, Felis sylvestris libica, the ancestor of our modern domesticated cats. These clever little felines, native to the Near East, saw an opportunity, and they took it.
So you're saying it wasn't like humans intentionally set out to domesticate cats?
Right. It was more like this mutually beneficial arrangement, something that just evolved over time.
So how did that happen?
Well, the cats were drawn to the area because of the abundance of prey, right? They helped keep the rodent populations in check, protecting those valuable crops. And the humans, well, they recognized the value of having this all-natural pest control system and might have started offering a few scraps to their furry little helpers. Actually, the oldest evidence of cat taming comes from Cyprus. It dates back to about 7,500 to 7,200 BC.
Wow, that's incredible. So this bond between humans and cats, it goes back, what, like over 9,000 years?
Yeah, something like that. But it wasn't just limited to the Fertile Crescent. Just as those agricultural practices spread, so did domesticated cats. They became like, well, integral members of human communities, traveling with us, adapting to new environments, and eventually making their way across Europe, Asia, and as we've seen, even along the Silk Road to China.
It's amazing how far they traveled. And it's also interesting to think about how, despite thousands of years of living alongside humans, domestic cats haven't actually changed that much genetically from their wild ancestors, not as much as dogs, for example.
Yeah, it's kind of a reminder that domestication, it's this ongoing process, this dance between nature and nurture. Even today, with all our fancy breeding programs and all the pampering we do, there's still this wild cat in their hearts, this spark of independence that reminds us of where they came from.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways you think our listeners should walk away with today?
I think this deep dive shows how interconnected our world has always been. Trade routes, migration patterns, even something as seemingly simple as the arrival of cats in a new land, these things can have ripple effects that we're still experiencing today.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder that history isn't just a bunch of dates and names. It's about exploring those connections, understanding how biology and culture play off each other, and appreciating how even the smallest creatures can have a big impact on our world.
So next time you see a cat, whether it's just chilling in a sunbeam or, stalking a toy mouse, think about their ancestors. Those wild cats who first ventured into human settlements, those brave travelers who journeyed along the Silk Road, and those cultural icons who captured the hearts of the Tang Dynasty elite.
And maybe you'll even be inspired to do your own deep dive. Uncover those hidden stories that connect us all, across time and continents.
Thanks for joining us on this feline adventure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.